How appropriate, then, that we welcome now to sing the anthem of the new Europe, Ode to Joy from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the distinguished British baritone, Robert Bennington.
I feel like it's the same as somebody that's had a really bad argument. They flounced out the house, then realised they've left their credit cards, their car keys and their coat in there, and now they've got to go back in and eat humble pie.
When I hear that argument,
you know,
I've only remained, but when I hear that argument, I go up north and I meet people and I talk to them. Or my village, I go and talk to people down there. Trust me,
anywhere outside of London.
That is not what Leave people think, right? Leave people find that incredibly patronising, that somehow they're the dummies, all 17.4 million of them. Only the Remainers were smart enough to know what was going on. They've all made a terrible mistake. That's not what Leave people think.
The ones that wanted to leave made a decision without thinking it through.
No, the ones that made the decision to leave, they didn't get a Leave Prime Minister who could negotiate the deal.
Correct.
So they voted for
the
something
terms
that
and
then
conditions
remained
weren't clear in the first place.
Yeah,
Now
that's
we need to make
exactly.
the terms and conditions clear, and everyone knows exactly what's on the table, what the deal
Yeah, but
is,
only
and that's what
Remainers
we
think
vote on.
that they didn't know what they were voting. Leavers didn't know what they were voting for. You ask a Leaver, they'll know exactly what they were voting for.
They voted to leave.
Awesome. Awesome.
But it's because it wasn't defined in 2016 that we're in this mess.
I knew this would happen. I knew this would happen. I knew we'd get stuck on this.
Whether you leave or remain was put to the British people, but what wasn't put to them is how do you leave?
If we vote to leave the European Union and leave the single market, that will have economic consequences. Obviously, if we vote to leave the EU,
Yes.
with the economic consequences that would have, leaving the single market.
You'd be in a very, very strange position. You'd be introducing an Australian-style point system you don't believe in, for instance, and you would, or would you not, be taking us out of the single market? Because there is room for a Prime Minister to negotiate that after the shock of a Brexit vote.
I think one of the most important moments in this campaign was when the Out campaign said they wanted to leave the single market. They didn't have to make that choice. They've made that choice. And what the British public would be voting for, hang on, let me just finish. The British public would be voting, if we leave, would be to leave the EU and leave the single market.
You have said that leaving the single market would be putting a bomb under the British economy, and yet you're in now in the position saying, as Prime Minister, I will then detonate the bomb.
Well, I must accept the instructions of the British people.
So
that is what a referendum is about. But if we leave the EU, and the German finance minister was very clear, you're either in or you're out. Leaving the single market.
Britain would be quitting the single market.
So this idea that there's a World Trade Organization status for Britain trading with the European Union that is freely available and good for us is a complete myth. It would be hugely damaging to our economy, but nonetheless, that is where the Leave campaign currently are.
No member of the customs union makes its own free trade deals, so you would accept that we could not then do free trade deals with Canada, America, Australia, India, if Labour's policy of remaining in the customs union.
Well, we've got to negotiate a trade deal with the EU. It's taken Canada 7 years to do that and counting. And then you've got to negotiate trade deals with the 53 other countries covered by our trading arrangements with the EU.
You've got, if you like, a kind of Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage version of Brexit, which is, I would say, a kind of true Brexit, which takes us out of the economic structures of the European Union as well as the political structures.
Boris Farage deal. What is your understanding as we sit here now about what that deal is? What is their Brexit, do you think?
Right, so I think to be fair to them, it's clearer than people are saying.
Right.
It's basically what I was just describing. You break free from Europe's rules, you set your own rules. Now,
so you're out of the single market and you're out of the customs union.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which is what David Cameron, when he was the Prime Minister, said in the run-up to the referendum.
Well,
he very clearly said that it would mean leaving the customs union single market.
I completely agree with you, Piers, by the way. I don't say people didn't know what they were voting for. They did know what they were voting for. But I honestly think if you're going to leave, leave.
Okay.
But don't do this halfway house.
Well, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. So I've said this from the start of all this. Yes, you can blame the Remainers. All right, you lost and I lost. I voted Remain. I don't think we should be doing it. But I do believe if you're going to honour the will of what people were voting for, it has to be a proper Brexit.
Now, Theresa May sought to put actually Andrew's kind of hard Brexit, WTO terms, no deal type situation potentially to the British people at the 2017 general election.
Poor British people for trusting its political establishment
But
to do what they told them to.
The problem is, but Richard, the point is, the voters rejected that form of Brexit, and what Parliament has been trying to do.
You don't know what the voters.
Well, there was no, Richard, there was not a majority for that form of Brexit.
What will happen on leaving the European Union is that we cease to be members of the single market, and therefore free movement ends.
We would want a form of customs union. Obviously, whether it would be the customs union, answer no, because it would require being a member of the EU, which we're not.
What would the question be?
Well, the question would be, we've negotiated an actual exit from the EU. It should be the deal we've negotiated. Obviously, this is my personal opinion.
Just give me the question.
My personal opinion, it would be deal versus membership of the EU. That's my personal opinion.
Why anyone thinks that having another referendum now is going to bring the country together, let alone having a referendum where, as I understand it, you have her deal on the table, the deal she does with Corbyn, let's say, but then it's not a yes or no to that, it's yes to that or remain. That is so cooked up and so bent that no one is going to, and you'll end up endangering the deal and really,
and by the way,
more.
just go one stage further. If we leave, on April the 12th or May the 22nd, and then it's not confirmed by the referendum, does that not mean we have to reapply for membership? And do not new members have to join the euro?
Yeah,
I mean,
they have to commit to doing it.
The thing becomes
actually
that would be a slightly paradoxical outcome from the referendum.
We're being shouted at. We've got to finish. But the point of the original referendum was that it did offer people a straightforward binary choice. Yeah. And what your referendum question appears to me to do is to manipulate the vote. And I think people will not go and vote.
As I just explained, that deal takes us out of the EU. It fulfills the referendum mandate.
A lot of people don't think that it does. That's why it won't pass Parliament.
Sorry, the customs union is not the European Union. Let's be clear on that.
You think that it takes us out of the EU, but the majority of people who want to leave don't agree with you.
This is where Jeremy Corbyn has to put country before party, and actually won't be difficult for him to do, because he's against the second referendum, and he's right to be against the second referendum.
Some people have talked about a second referendum a few years later.
I don't think that. This is the vote. There's no second vote. This is the vote. This is the crucial decision of our lifetimes. Do we stay in the European Union, a reformed European Union, or do we leave? And
so
I think anyone
and you have another chance to negotiate.
I think anyone who votes out on the assumption that a year or two later you can have another vote to vote back in, I think is being unrealistic about the nature of the choice. And I think it's really important that British people focus on the fact this is the once-in-a-lifetime decision.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime debate.
Could another referendum? No, not at all. You know that's it. That's the sort of politics that people are rejecting. You've got to be straightforward and honest with people.
If we leave on no deal, if we stick to the law as it is, we become an independent country. And I would say to you, what price? Freedom. But I'll be the first to admit, I doubt this will happen, because working in cahoots with you, we have Mr Blair and many other leaders of the British establishment who treat the Brexit vote and treat voters in general with total and utter contempt. And there is a great tradition here, isn't there? We've seen it with Denmark and with Ireland. You make people vote again. All I can say is if we finish up with an extension of Article 50, we may well finish up fighting the next set of European elections, and we will fight them. And if the betrayal becomes complete and we are forced to vote in a second referendum, you may be in for a big surprise. The British may be a very placid people, very laid back, but I promise you, if they get pushed too far, it's a lion that will roar. We will be even more defiant if we have to fight a second referendum, and we'll win it by a bigger majority. Yeah.